Well, this is incredible. What do you think you saw?
I saw something I was never familiar with before, and I don't think it came from human hands.
This is pretty incredible. Lou is telling us the same story as Dan Jones. What is the relationship between these UFOs and these unmarked silent helicopters? Are they related to these mutilations?
I feel there's a connection between the lights and the mutilations.
We've had multiple UFO sightings near the scene of these cattle mutilations, but the one thing that's missing from these cases is actual physical evidence. We're about to speak with someone who risked his professional reputation by investigating cattle mutilations here in the San Luis Valley.
One of the common complaints that we had heard from ranchers was that official government agencies aren't paying them any attention.
John Paternoster is the former DA of Taos County. Now he's a district judge, but he's still involved in trying to find out who's behind these unexplained animal deaths.
They wanted some official resource to treat their problem seriously.
Did you ever try to ask for help in pursuing this investigation from the state agencies like the governor's office, like the state attorney general's office?
The government agencies generally were less than willing to step up to the plate and get involved in X-Files kinds of things.
How strong is the evidence that cattle mutilations are a real phenomenon?
Well, it's real. Animals are dying and animals are being mutilated. It's what's causing it that is open to debate and investigation.
For someone with his background, with his credentials, to say this after all the research that he's done, it tells me that we're on the right path and that we're getting closer to some sort of truth here.
Because we brought a more purely forensic approach to the investigation, we were able to ignore a lot of the popular cultural theories because there was no evidence to support them.
What forensic evidence were you able to establish at these scenes?
In one of the gross analyses of the scene, we did see some unusual geometric impressions in mud near the animal.
What were so unusual about these impressions?
They just seemed anomalous, out of place.
We're speaking with District Court Judge John Paternoster, who may have found evidence of some UFO connection to these cattle mutilations.
They were rectangular and fairly deep, almost as if someone had put a tripod into the mud because they were pressed down a couple of inches.
What he's saying is huge. We're hearing of actual evidence on the ground that could connect UFOs to the cattle mutilation phenomenon.
There were 3 of these impressions?
We saw 3 at one scene, not directly over the animal, but in their own context.
And there were no footprints leading from the impressions to the animal.
Correct.
Now, we've heard this in other places, right here in New Mexico.
Now, you're saying there were actual indentations from the craft down here?
Yes, there's one indentation right there.
This is one of the original indentations?
Yes.
And there was also a roughly triangular formation in the wet sand at RAF Bentwaters in Rendlesham Forest.
There were indentations in the ground where this thing had landed. It was almost as if this craft had come down on a tripod-like device.
So guys, where are we after all this?
I don't think it's humans, and I just think this idea of some kind of a global military government cattle mutilation operation going on is it's not possible. I'm thinking that we have to start looking at some of these UFO stories that are going on. We might have to start looking in that direction.
I'm with Pat. We need to explore the ET causality. We've got a fresh mutilation in Missouri and the opportunity to break this case. Galen fears they will return, and he's speaking from experience. We have to get back to his ranch, set up a stakeout, and try to catch who's ever doing this.
We've asked Ken Storch and Bob, who are two former law enforcement officers, to join us in this stakeout. Now, these guys have done hundreds of undercover operations, so we're going to take their lead in how to safely monitor this herd.
Whoever's doing this is using some high-tech equipment, and it won't be easy to catch them with the naked eye. So to help us out, we're taking some of our own high-tech. We're bringing a FLIR camera, which seeks out heat sources using infrared technology. And we also have a night vision scope to monitor the ranch and increase our surveillance ability.
While looking around the ranch to set up the best place for a stakeout, Galen showed me a stark reminder of just how devastating this problem is.
Wow. Yeah, that's the remains of several animals.
And so this is the remains of a mutilated cow.
Mutilated animal, yes.
Wow. When these things kept on repeating year after year, what were you thinking? I mean, was it thinking that somebody was after you because they were taking the cattle?
First, I began to think it was some people maybe targeted me, but I have no idea now. I'm totally at loss with what's going on and why they're doing it to the animal.
Your herd has been hit 26 times, which is incredible. 26 times. This must have devastated you, this level of depredation.
Yes, it devastated me enough that I'm going to get out of the business.
This is actually driving you out of the business?
Yes, sure is. Liquidate them all this summer.
After 40 years and after 20 years from your father?
Yes.
When you see the emotion etched on Galen Jones's face and hear the sadness in his voice as his ranching life must end, it's infuriating because there's nowhere he can turn for help. We're going to look for answers that will at least put some closure on this case, if for no one else, for Galen Jones.
Who could do this without leaving any trace?
A very sophisticated operation. Who or whatever is responsible for this? It's a serial killer is what it is.
This man, 25 head of cattle, this is the 26th. God forbid I catch you. I mean, this is serious. The feds need to investigate this and nobody's investigating it.
What evidence would we need to lay charges at the feet of a federal agency and said, now you have to investigate because here are the criminal charges?
Well, ideally is to catch them in the act, their hands in the cookie jar. The way to put a stop to this is that we become the hunters and we hunt them.
You've really got to have all your wits about you when you're out here on this kind of a stakeout.
Hey, you guys got to check this out.
What do you got?
We need to bring somebody to justice and solve some of these crimes. If you'll mutilate an animal or kill an animal, you will probably mutilate a human being.
We're going to set up a stakeout on Galen Jones's herd with Ken Storch and Bob. Our best case scenario is that we just might catch whoever is mutilating these cattle.
All right, boys and girls, this is what it's all about. I truly believe this is how we're going to catch the perps, whoever's responsible for these mutilations.
Ken and Bob have been on numerous stakeouts, so if we want to watch the cattle overnight and see if we can find the source of these cattle mutilations, these are the guys that we want with us.
We have the herd from which this mute was a part of, and we're hoping that the perps will show back up.
What we're looking for right now, as we're sitting here, we're trying to look for a light, something out of the ordinary. Hey, what if these boys don't need a light?
I have a forward-looking infrared camera here, operates in the infrared spectrum using heat waves, infrared wavelength, and I'm going to use this now and see if we can catch anything with the FLIR cam. Wow, that's amazing to see all the cows over there. It's pretty eerie. I can't see anything at all with my eyes, but hundreds of yards away I can see every single cow.
So we finally found Galen's herd along the tree line. If anything goes down tonight, these cows are going to be the target. So what we're going to do is keep this herd in view at all times.
Hey, you guys got to check this out.
What do you got?
Okay, can you guys see that little bright spot right there?
Yeah, I see that.
Those are our cows.
Wow. So they're really putting a lot of heat.
Well, that's how sensitive this equipment is. So whatever or whoever is doing this, if they're radiating any sort of heat, we'll pick it up on this camera.
Well, we have a night vision scope here, so we can keep a general eye out on things.
While Pat's using the FLIR camera, I'm starting out with the night vision scope, which actually has a better range than the FLIR, so I can get a really clear view of the tree line beyond the pasture.
I can tell the difference between trees and the night sky, trees in the ground.
So with the FLIR camera and the night vision scope, we have the full perimeter covered. If anybody comes near the pasture, we'll see them.
There's the herd.
Any activity?
No. They're just waiting around just like we are, to tell you the truth.
It was a long night out in the pasture, and we didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But the good thing is, nothing hurt Galen Jones's cows, and there wasn't a mutilation. Who really is responsible for this?
I do know that bovine hemoglobin is genetically very, very similar to that of humans. And I've also read that the government's conducting tests so that in case there's this large disaster and we need a large amount of human blood, but we don't have it, what we do is we resort to bovine blood as a substitute.
There is no alien harvest, but it's a great smokescreen and it's working very well.
I think the military is involved, but not the way you think. I think it's aliens, and I think the military is monitoring their activity, monitoring these mutilations, and maybe in an attempt to cover them up so as not to panic the public. The aliens come in, mutilate the cows, and the helicopters that people are seeing are coming in after the fact, one step behind.
The military isn't just there to watch. They're not just monitoring. I think the military is cooperating with the extraterrestrials that are doing the mutilation. From the military perspective, maybe they're breeding the perfect warrior. From the alien perspective, maybe they're hybridizing the species using bovine hemoglobin, which is all they need, to culture the egg cells that they're fertilizing with alien DNA. A whole new species being bred from the soft tissue of cows to create something we can't even imagine. Just 2 weeks after we completed our investigation, we got a call from Galen Jones that he'd had another mutilation, a calf, making it 27 mutilations since 1991. And in Los Animas County, where Lou Girotto has said these cattle mutilations are ongoing, there were 3 new cases since we last completed our investigation. The phenomenon is real, and it's ongoing.